This is Tier 8 Premium Soviet battleship Lenin, and if you're watching this, then she should shortly be in your premium shop for your region if she's not already. She is of course being released alongside the Tier 3 to 10 Soviet battleship Tech Tree line. In real life, this ship never actually existed. It's a paper ship that's been imagined into the game, and it was part of Project 21, or would have been part of Project 21, which was a big fleet program that the Soviets had to try to build battleships which were as close as possible to breaching the Naval Convention, the Washington Naval Treaty. And so it tried to squeeze as much of the ship as possible behind the armour to make it as efficient as possible in terms of protecting the vital parts of the ship. And legend has it that the designs may have been stolen from the Brits. It bears a striking resemblance to Nelson. Of course, it also looks like Izuma, which also has a historical relationship to Nelson. The gun turrets are slightly differently arranged to both those other ships. You'll see the middle turret is actually super firing and 360 degrees, and we'll see a little bit of detail of that in just a second. Many thanks to members of my community for helping piece together the little bit of history that's known about this ship there, so thanks to you guys. The combination on this ship of its forward placed turrets and also its very strong armour scheme, which we'll look at shortly in port, promotes a very nose-in playstyle, and you're going to probably be playing this somewhat stationary on the map, using it for command presence. It's not the quickest ship in the world. It doesn't turn particularly quickly. So you're not going to be dodging any torpedoes or doing anything like that. This is very much an area control, area denial battleship. What it lacks though in ship maneuverability, it does make up for in turret mobility. The turret turn is, like a lot of the other Russian battleships, is pretty quick, with a side-to-side turn time of just over 30 seconds. Means that you can switch targets very easily, and the 360 turret in the middle also means that you can pretty much always get one turret on target very quickly. One thing I just want to very quickly point out is this lovely little animation on that rear turret as the guns just dip down underneath the armour of the turret number 2 there as they traverse the ship to the other side. Lovely little animation. The artists on the Soviet battleships have also done a great job with the camos. They have this kind of wavy pattern in muted greys and greens, and they all look pretty nice, and the red decks of the Soviet battleships definitely also stand out here. The only thing I don't like about the ship aesthetically is the rear end, but I suppose that's historically how it was, with that little bit that looks like it's cut out. Okay, here we are in port looking at the armour scheme of this ship, and you can see that the 100mm belt there goes all the way to the tip of the nose. So not only do you get that pretty strong side belt, not the strongest, but pretty strong, and very strong turret protection obviously, but you do get that icebreaker nose. So most battleships at this tier, around sort of 8 to 10, have 32mm noses. Some of them have armour belts that go out to, part way down the nose, but this one is, I think, the only one that has a belt that goes all the way to the tip of the nose at this tier grouping. Okay, I'm just going to mouse through some of the vital statistics here, so please do feel free to pause it. Don't forget this ship is set up, these aren't the stock values. So the main battery turret turn is pretty good. The main battery reload is pretty slow as per the Russians, but you can get that down a little bit with some skills. The AA is kind of average, I would describe it as. I wouldn't rely on it, certainly. You're probably going to be wanting to park next to some other ship for a bit of protection. Concealment is Russian, I would say, but you're going to be pretty close in because the accuracy bonus you get when you're up close warrants you pushing in anyway. Consumables wise, you do get a plane on the ship, which is quite unusual for the Soviets. You do get a limited use DCP like the other Russian battleships. You have to use those wisely, but they do have a very quick cooldown. And you get a heal, obviously, like all battleships. This is how I have my Soviet commander set up for the battleships, and I recommend this build for all of them. The only skill I might swap out is Concealment Expert, because you're going to be so close that it might not be necessary, and you can use those 4 points on something else. Right, let's look at some gameplay. This is quite lucky matchmaking, tier 8 high. So we are top tier, there is a carrier. So we might have to worry about that, but we do have our fighter consumable, unlike the Tech Tree Russian battleships. So this is going to be fairly typical play, I think. I'm going to be fairly stationary. I'm not going to show you the whole match because I'm basically just sitting behind a rock and preventing a push. So I will skip ahead until we make contact. So you can see I've pushed up over to one flank with a Nuremberg and a Dunkirk in tow. There's also a Kid and a Leander nearby. There's a Huanghe just pushing down here. He's getting a bit harassed by the carrier, which is a mistake because, of course, the Huanghe has very, very good AA for its tier. So I am just waiting to get a shot. But the thing is, with the Russian dispersion and Sigma interaction at this range, I'm very unlikely to actually get many shells on him, if any. This is partly because he's maneuvering, partly because I can't aim and he's behind a mountain, but also because of the Russian dispersion formula. So pretty much the Russian battleships beyond about 15 kilometers, they have very poor Sigma for the entire range. That doesn't change, but their dispersion pattern gets a lot tighter as you get closer to the ship. And what this means is that at range they perform even worse than the German battleships, but close up they get the dispersion pattern of basically cruisers. So even though they have bad Sigma, when you're closer than about 15 kilometers, and definitely when you're closer than say 11 or 12 kilometers, your shells will all land very close to where you aim because of that close dispersion pattern, that very tight dispersion pattern. So even though the shells are going off at different angles, they don't go too far from where you aim. So at that first shot I took, the dispersion would have been terrible, but now he's closed within 10 kilometers. My shots should, in theory, all land roughly where I aim. But you can still see the Sigma there a little bit when I've not got him targeted with the one shell going off on its own. So you will see that quite a lot on these ships with one shell or two shells seeming to go in a very strange direction, and that's just the poor Sigma showing itself. Broadside Massachusetts. Whenever you see a broadside battleship and you are in a battleship, obviously you should take the shot, especially if they're American and especially if they're Russian, because of course the Russian battleship's armor scheme at higher tiers is very similar to the Americans, and they citadel very nicely if you're shooting them with a battleship. So when you see these Russian battleships on the battlefield and you're in a battleship and you see them broadside, don't think, oh, they've got very strong armor, I'll never get a citadel on him. Absolutely, you can get a citadel on the side of these ships. And so one of the strengths of the Lenin here is that because all your guns are on the front and you can switch them from side to side very quickly, actually you can do a 180 quicker than your reload, you definitely don't want to be giving your broadside because you've got no reason to do so, and your side armor can absolutely be penetrated at closer ranges by the enemy battleships, even the lower tiered ones. So you definitely want to be very careful. So definitely keep your nose pointed at the enemy battleships. Of course, if you show your side to cruisers, that's not such a bad thing, as long as they don't have torpedoes. That Huanghe there does have torpedoes, and I can't remember quite what the range is on them, but I'm pretty sure at this point that I am further away than his torpedo range, so I'm in no danger other than maybe the odd fire here and there. Now I'm bow tanking those battleships there in front of me. I'm going to try and duck in behind this rock. And the plan is basically, I'm expecting them to carry on going towards the map border here, so I'm going to try and help the team get rid of this this cruiser. Not being very lucky with the dispersion there. The carrier dropping me as well. And basically my plan is to nose up behind this island and basically treat this battleship like a massive heavy cruiser, and just basically wait for them to come around the corner one by one, and pick them off as they do. Because we've got a cruiser down there on the one line, who is that Nuremberg, who's turned around and is kiting, so he's going to be shooting HE up at them. So they're going to want to push around the corner and get him, and hopefully I'll be unspotted for long enough that they'll forget that I'm here, basically. And I'm just hoping they're going to parade around the corner one at a time, and I can just blap them as they come around the corner. So at this point I'm pretty sure that Massachusetts is either going to push up to the corner and stop, or maybe just barrel on through. But actually he's fairly switched on to what's going on, and he's turned away. I think he's just taking shots at that Nuremberg over his shoulder there. Maybe he can also see the Leander. And I can see the other two are still not quite up to the rock, so I'm going to poke my nose around the corner here. Try and hide my citadel from the other ships whilst shooting the Massachusetts. Just as he makes his turn, he's not expecting me, well, he may have his eye on the minimap, but he's not expecting me to pop out just then, I don't think. And I get a lovely citadel there, 26,000 plus 4 pence. So that just shows you. Now the Jaws is coming. Now, of course, they do have torpedoes. They're very fast, but they're only 4-kilometer torps. So I'd anticipated that because I saw him coming. So I'm just reversing. The ship does actually change direction to forward to back quite nicely. Obviously, it's still a battleship, so it takes a while, but it does accelerate and decelerate quite nicely, which you definitely need in this ship because you're going to be sitting still quite a lot. Now, the gun depression at that range, if you're wondering why I aimed so high, it was simply because I couldn't aim any lower because the gun depression wouldn't go any further down, so I just had to settle for some superstructure overpens. But it did a decent chunk, but unfortunately he got a ram on our Dunkirk, who also seemed to want to ram him, which was a bit of a poor decision, I think. So I haven't changed my mind here. I'm still going to sit here and wait for anything that comes around the corner. But because my turret turn is so fast, what I can do is keep my nose pointed at that corner and then start taking shots at this New Mexico, who is broadside to me. Obviously, he's a tier 6, I'm a tier 8, so I'm going to do decent damage to him. And he's busy with other things at the moment, so he's very unlikely to be looking over at me. But because the range is 15 kilometers, you can see there the dispersion's not brilliant. And even though my aim was reasonable, the shells landed quite far apart from each other. And so as he goes further and further away, then that's going to get worse and worse and worse. But I've got nothing else to shoot at this point, so I may as well. But I definitely want to carry on pinning this Duke of York behind that rock there so he can't push whilst I'm shooting this New Mexico. Right, I've noticed the Graf's Bay on the minimap is coming forward, so I'm turning my attention. So my 90-degree turn time is something like 15 seconds, so I can definitely get my guns on him before they reload, which is very, very nice to be able to shoot one volley at one target and then change targets on completely the other side of the map before my guns reload. That's just awesome. That's one of the features that I absolutely love about the Russian battleships. He's turned away, which is probably a good thing because you tend to get overpens on broadside cruisers with these guns, so angling is probably a good thing, although he doesn't turn as far as I think he's going to. So although the dispersion on that shot was fantastic, I actually missed the shot because he didn't turn. Now he's making the turn. Of course, I'm not reloaded. But Duke of York is just quite happy just to sit there. He's basically doing the same thing that I'm doing and trying to discourage that Bismarck and me from pushing around the corner. But of course, there's two of us. At this point in the game, you know, I'm not exactly sure what the enemy is going to do. We're massively ships up, so all I've got to do is just hold this side of the map, basically. And then the destroyer gets spotted, so I'm using my very fast gun turn. Although I'm unlikely to land more than maybe one shell, I'm still going to have a pop and see if I can get a shell on. I'm also reversing because there's far fewer ships now on the enemy team. And I don't know whether maybe that Duke of York has done a little 3-point turn and he's going to come around the other side, and I don't know whether Massachusetts is. There he is. So I was reversing just in case they come around the other side of the rock to make sure I can get a shot on them and make sure they don't broadside me. However, our Bismarck has decided to use his turtleback armour scheme and charge the Duke of York, which is not necessarily a bad decision. I guess he's probably also secondary spec. And so I'm just going to push back forwards here because I'm expecting maybe some kind of ram to go on or some kind of broadsiding to go on, and one of those two to not be here anymore. Leander also may well have friendly torps hitting the Bismarck. I can't quite remember. Duke of York, of course, is engaged in brawling that Bismarck, and he's probably not paying attention to the fact that I'm here. So I'm pushing forward to get this lovely broadside. Yep, that was not too bad. Not what I was hoping for, no citadels, but not too bad. And so now I'm just going to chase this guy. I'm still on more or less full health, and so I've got no worries at all. As long as I keep my nose pointed at these guys, I've got no worries at all in brawling both the Duke of York and the Massachusetts at the same time. But I'm just going to wait for that Massachusetts to come across because it looks like he's coming across full broadside. So I'm just going to bow tank this Duke of York here. Maybe the Leander will get some torps on him. I can just whittle him down. He certainly can't do much to me if I'm nose in. There we go, friendly torps. Not friendly torps, normal torps. And then Massachusetts is going to come around full broadside, and we know We were discussing earlier what happens when American battleships show you their broadside, and I honestly can't remember whether this is a good volley or not. The dispersion looks fantastic at 7 odd kilometers. 3 pens, 10,000, not too bad. So he's decided he doesn't like that. The Leander down there is getting a little bit harassed by the carrier, not much I can do about that. But he's still shooting back, fair play to him. And so I'm just going to keep on at this Massachusetts, and it looks like the Lyon over there in the middle is also on him. And just going to chase him. You definitely, on a sort of one-on-one situation with a battleship like this, you definitely, in a Russian battleship, you definitely want to keep the distance nice and close. And one of the skills in the Russian battleships is going to be knowing when to push and knowing when not to push. Because unlike the German battleships, which kind of have a similar kind of play style of brawling, pushing close, these do not have the same armor scheme. They are very weak from the side, just like the American battleships, but you need to be close in order to get that good accuracy. And so sometimes, especially at the beginning of a match, when there's lots of enemies who might be firing across the map at you, you definitely want to just take a little bit of a defensive posture, make sure your side is covered, just keep an eye on the minimap, keep an eye on what's shooting you. But these ships really come into their own in the second half of the match when a good chunk of the enemy is dead and you don't have to worry quite so much about being broadsided. Then you can be extremely aggressive and you can push right up to enemy ships. And you can bow tank, especially in this Lenin with its icebreaker 100mm bow armor. That's going to really help you with absorbing a few shots here and there. It is still mostly a 32mm nose, but it does have that 100mm bound, which is definitely going to help. And just finishing off with some shots at the carrier here. Of course, he is quite a long way away, so my accuracy is not going to be that great. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You can guess what's going to happen here, so I'll just skip to the results. Okay, there we go. 88,410 damage. Pretty good base XP there. Obviously I was top tier, so it was an ideal situation, but this can definitely hold its own in a tier 10 match as long as you are very aware of what's shooting at you. And you mustn't forget that, of course, Musashi and Yamato can both overmatch your 32mm sections of your nose, although they may hit occasionally that 100mm belt, which will protect you. So yeah, if you like a nose-in playstyle, if you've played Nelson, if you played Izumo or Richelieu, ships like that, and you like them, you're probably going to like this. It's a much more aggressive version of those ships, basically. It allows you to take a very similar map position to those other ships, but then push in very aggressively at the end, which is an enormous amount of fun. So my final verdict for this ship, would I recommend this ship? Yes, absolutely. This is a brilliant battleship. Its characteristics are in line with the other main tech tree ships going up to the Kreml, with their close range accuracy and their good armor schemes if you angle well, and the fact that they require a little bit of intelligence to avoid being broadsided by other battleships. And of course, if you're going to push in at close range, you also need to manage your hit points well with taking torpedoes and things like that. You need to anticipate torpedoes. You need to use your fast cooldown but limited use damage control party consumables very well. You need to manage your heals very well. And so these are definitely good battleships to teach you how to play battleships. And I've said this before, but I highly recommend the Russian battleship line for beginner battleship players, and I think actually the meta is going to really benefit from the introduction of these Russian battleships, including the Lenin, because the game needs more aggressive battleship players that are playing ships that can cope with being aggressive. The battleship play at the moment is maybe a little bit too passive, so I think these will inject a good bit of something a bit different and hopefully change the meta just that little bit. So do I recommend this? Yes, absolutely. They're great fun. So if you fancy a premium Russian battleship at tier 8, then go and get it. It should be in the premium shop right now. Well, I've been Stats. Thank you for watching this review. If you want to join the StatsBloke, then please do click the link in the description to the Discord server, and also catch me on Twitch at twitch.tv/StatsBloke, link also in the description. Take care of each other, and I'll speak to you very soon.